Testing, testing.
Yeah, that's true. We could do the intros, couldn't we? Yeah. Oh. David, we've just not got Peter Armitage. He hasn't gone to the wrong building, have you, by any chance? Have you got a number for him? Can you just check he's on his way?
I did send him a hard copy agenda as well, just to sort of reinforce the venue. Maybe don't use yours.
Oh. Okay, we're just waiting for a member to arrive, but just for those who are logging on to the meeting remotely, just to say we are going to start a few minutes late. I'm guessing probably about 10:05. Thank you. Well, good morning, and welcome to the Development Control Committee meeting today, the 24th of April 2024. Just a few things to say before we begin the meeting. It will be live streamed on YouTube. So if there's any member in the public gallery attending who objects to being filmed, then please advise us immediately, and we'll ensure that they are not included in the filming. Although I do stress that if you are actually in the public gallery, you're not going to be filmed substantially anyway, only if you're moving around. So could I just check, does anyone, I mean, there's a small audience today, does anyone object to being live streamed? No, okay. Thank you very much indeed. And as I've already heard Councillor Glossop saying, where's our card for the cue to speak, which is what we use at Bury St. I heard that. We don't have that facility here today, so we have to go back to the, dare I say, the old school way, which if you want to speak, put your hand up, and I'll take a note, or one of the officers will take a note and prompt me to invite you to speak. And then when I ask you to speak, then press your microphone to speak, which we know is okay. So thanks for that. Can I just turn now to the formal agenda? So the first thing I have to ask for, Helen, is apologies for absence, please.
Chair, you have apologies from councillors Mike Chester, Laura J. Miller-Jones, Marilyn Sayer and Phil Whittam.
Thank you, Helen. And are there any substitutes, please? Could you just announce yourself?
I'm sorry, I didn't realise I had to announce myself, Andrew. So,
That's
yeah,
okay.
Peter Armitage for, I think it's Marilyn Sayer.
It is. Thank you very much indeed. So now we turn our attention to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 3rd of April 2024. Are there any comments or corrections, please, to those minutes? No, I couldn't spot any either. That's fine. So could I have a proposer for the minutes, please? Councillor Dicker. And could I have a seconder, please? Councillor London. So as proposed by Councillor Dicker and Councillor London, the unamended minutes, could I see a show of hands for accepting those minutes, please?
Thank you. That motion is carried and the minutes are approved.
Thank you, Claire. Oh. It's me again. That's right, yeah. Okay, declarations of interest, and this is where I have to remind members of their responsibility to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registerable or non-registerable interests which they have in any item of business on the agenda, and that should be no later than when the item is reached and when appropriate to leave the meeting prior to discussion and voting on the item. Are there any interests to be declared? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Just before we invite Joanne to make the presentation, Claire has got a statement that she would like to read out to the committee. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. As a point of procedure and transparency regarding the site visit, a minibus was provided by the applicant to escort members safely to the application site. This was due to health and safety requirements as the site is an operational plant. As a result, a representative of the applicant was in attendance on that minibus and during the course of the visit answered some questions relating to the application. Those responses confirmed details which are contained in the application but added no new information.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire. Those of us who were on the site visit understand exactly the point you're making. So, could I now invite Joanne, who is the case officer, to present the application, and I will move out of the way, our committee. Thank you.
Good morning. So today we are looking at the proposal for an operation of a concrete batching plant is for a temporary period of 3 years. The machinery has already been moved onto site but is not yet in operational use. The application is brought before committee following consideration from members at delegation panel. The site is outside of any development boundary and is in land classified as countryside. The application site itself, outlined within the red line, just here, is set within Lake and Heath Recycling Centre. The recycling centre recycles materials used in association with the construction industry. This includes importing, crushing and screening concrete, brick, tarmac, topsoil and subsoil, as well as importing sand, gravel, limestone and car stone. The recycling centre in which the batching plant is positioned has got permission. It was given permission in 2014 through a lawful development certificate from Suffolk County Council. As a council, West Suffolk were consulted on that application. The site is highlighted on the plan by the star. To the north of the site is Lake and Heath Clay Target Centre, located just about here. To the west of the site is Brandon Road, and beyond that is RAF Lake and Heath. To the east and the south is open agricultural land. The site is within the 1,500 metre buffer zone around those parts of the SPA which support or are capable of supporting the Stone Curlew and Natural England SSSI impact risk zone. There is a public right of way to the rest of the site, adjacent to the highway. As stated, the site is located outside but immediately adjacent to the Breckland Special Protection Area, and therefore within the 1,500 metre buffer around components of the Breckland Special Protection Area, which support or are capable of supporting the Stone Curlew. Natural England and our ecology officer have both confirmed that the proposals would not have an adverse impact upon any ecology, including the Stone Curlew. The reasons for this have been identified as being the nature of the development being that it is commercial, not residential, and would therefore not increase any visitors to the SPA in the same way new housing does. No additional lighting is proposed to the site. The batching plant would not exceed the current noise levels from the recycling plant as is, and the minimal cumulative increase would be less than 1 decibel. The batching plant was moved to site and constructed outside of the nesting period. The batching plant is set within a well-established site which already sees a degree of disturbance and use from a range of vehicles and plant machinery. Vehicle emissions would be overall reduced within the wider SAC, as the site is close to the end user, the RAF base adjacent. The site itself and the recycling centre is predominantly hard standing and does not therefore facilitate any nesting habitats or contribute to any features of the SAC. The batching plant would be located here to the rear of the recycling centre. It's approximately 345 metres from the western boundary, which runs adjacent to the highway. As stated, the site is classified within countryside, and as such policy DM5 would apply. This does permit economic growth and expansion of businesses and enterprise within the countryside. Policy CS6 also looks to support sustainable economic development and highlights employment uses at RAF Lakenheath as a priority within the district. The material produced by the batching plant would be used in the ongoing improvements and works at the RAF base, not just in operational works but also to accommodate the residential facilities. I have been advised that those include upgrades to runways, parking areas and military accommodation for personnel, including the facilities provided for the forces families. This has been evidenced by the applicant, who has sent a number of invoices illustrating the ongoing works at the RAF base. Gate 8 for the RAF Lakenheath is located to the north-east of the site and is approximately 2.1 kilometres from the entrance of the recycling plant. So the materials used for the batching plant would largely be on site already within the recycling centre, and traffic would increase by a modest amount of approximately 12%. With the majority of movements associated with the batching plant being short and in close proximity to the site, being from the batching plant itself to gate 8 of the RAF base. The plan itself is illustrating the proposed batching plant, loading areas in which the hardcore materials will be placed are to the left and silos for storage to the right. The concrete would be dispatched into vehicles which would drive underneath the central section. Just here. This plan illustrates the elevations of the batching plant. The batching plant would have a length of 33 metres and width of 20 metres. The highest part of the batching plant would be the silos, which have a height of 17 metres. And this is just showing the section through of the proposed batching plant as stated. So the loading area here, where you would put the materials. Further sectional plans illustrating the batching plant, specifically the central areas where lorries would drive through to receive the concrete before taking it on to RAF Lakenheath. We have views of the batching plant. This is taken from the shooting range car park to the northeast of the site. You'll be able to see the silos projecting and the surrounding countryside from the lake around the recycling plant. As you'll be aware, Landscapes have objected to the proposal, and they have highlighted that there's potential for moderate harm to the landscape. Point out that the batching plant is set well within the existing recycling centre and is some 345 metres from the boundary with the highway. The batching plant would be seen in the context of the well-established recycling plant and against the backdrop of storage of aggregate machinery, materials, storage buildings and other construction machinery. The Place Services have requested an environmental colour assessment be submitted to the LPA, and it is considered that this would ensure that there is due regard given to the colour and texture of the machinery with the aim of mitigating some of the visual impacts of the development on the surrounding landscape. I think that's going to be highlighted with the ongoing slides. This is the entrance to the site. As mentioned, the batching plant would be located to the rear of the existing recycling centre and it would utilise the existing site access. Photo of the batching plant. This is taken from the north of the site, from the access road as you would go into the shooting range. It's looking to illustrate how visible the batching plant would be from views within the wider landscape. This would be a view of the batching plant from the from Brandon Road, the A1065. As mentioned, the plant will be located away from the highway, and this would look to reduce the impacts of views from the main road itself. These are from the west of the site, so again taken from the highway. Had safely pulled over. The batching plant seen in the context of the recycling plant, including the storage building and storage piles of aggregate. Now, as stated, the recycling plant does benefit from planning permission, so it would just be the batching plant that we'd be looking at, but it's just to highlight the context of how the batching plant would be seen. Further views of the batching plant taken from the south of the site, again along from the highway, again highlighting the existing character of the recycling centre, including the various machinery and the storage of aggregates. We received no comments from the parish, but Councillor Kelly and Councillor Ritten did raise various concerns, specifically the increase in traffic, specifically southbound, lack of real washing facilities, impact of the recycling plant on the landscape, and concerns raised about Natural England's views and support of the proposal. In regards to this, I'd highlight that wheel washing facilities are already on site for the larger recycling plant, and the development relates only to the batching plant. So a condition for wheel washing could only relate to vehicles visiting the plant, and not all vehicles accessing the recycling centre. And as stated, it would be quite a moderate increase in traffic resulting from the batching plant itself. I've already discussed landscape and ecology concerns, so I won't go over those again. And as discussed, the batching plant is there to produce materials for the ongoing projects at RAF Lakenheath, not just the F35 project. See, there are no objections other than that from landscapes. So most notably, highways, ecology, public health and housing and waste have no objections to the proposal. And the concerns of the landscape officer we have already raised and discussed. And again, no further objections from consulsees, notably Natural England and the RSPB. The proposed batching plant would bring economical benefits by supporting the existing recycling centre and upgrading works to the adjacent RAF base, which is one of the largest employers in the region. As such, the proposal would comply with the aims of DM5 and CS5. The impact of the development on the landscape has been carefully considered, especially in light of the concerns raised by the landscape officer. DM13 permits development which would have an adverse impact upon landscape character where harm will not be significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the proposal. And development will be permitted subject to other planning considerations. There have been no concerns regarding highway safety, and the proposal will have a minimal increase in traffic to the site, with the majority of traffic for the batching plant travelling short distances only and going from the batching plant to Gate 8 of the adjacent RAF base. Gate 8 is the contractor's base for the RAF, is the contractor's gate for the RAF base. The Ecology Officer and Natural England have no objections to the proposal, and they have stated that the development would not result in any harm to stone curlews. As such, it is considered that on balance the potential impact upon the landscape has been carefully assessed and taken into account fully, but would not be considered to outweigh the benefits brought by the proposal, and officers would therefore consider the proposal should be supported. Thank you. Hand you back up.
Thank you very much indeed, Joanne. I think next time I'll ask for a motorised chair. Okay, so we now turn our attention to registered public speakers, and we've got Ryan Holbrook, and you are the applicant. So you've got, I think you've been briefed, you've got 3 minutes, Ryan, yes?
Yeah, we'll try to keep it as best in the 3 minutes. Right,
well,
okay.
I'll stop you if you can't. Okay.
Okie dokie.
All right.
Ready to go, yeah? Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to sit and speak to you all today. Currently at RAF Lakenheath, we produce 4,000 tonnes of recycled aggregate every month, which is being supplied to existing concrete batchers across Norfolk and Suffolk. The grade of the aggregate that we produce would be suitable for general concrete foundations and lower the cost at being recycled. If approval is given today, the site batcher would aim to primarily use recycled aggregate and sand being produced on the site where the batcher is. This in turn means that no additional road movement should be created, in theory, of the batcher by utilising the recycled aggregate that would have otherwise been delivered to other locations. The location of the batcher is essential, with high-strength mixes of concrete being used for runways and taxiways that have an active life of 2 to 3 hours, and on occasions can take 2 hours plus to access through the contractor's gate, making the speed and location essential. From an environmental point of view, the finished level of the noise bund adjacent to the silos will end up being 7 metres higher than the current silo height. The batching plant is set on the existing runway foundation installed in the 1940s, and since we took stewardship of the site in 2018, we have established 2 new nesting locations for stone curlers. The site is continuously subject to annual ecology audits by our retained ecologist Middlemarch as part of the bund construction compliance procedure. The Environment Agency has approved the dust-to-air ratio for the baghouse being highly efficient and using the most modern technology. This was approved by Faye Rushby with the go-ahead to begin batching once planning has been approved. I believe during the site visits on Monday that you were shown our self-contained wheel wash, that as a part of company policy, all vehicles leaving the site must exit. The continued works at RAF Lakenheath. The batching plant is essential to supporting the mission-critical works still taking place at RAF Lakenheath, RAF Mildenhall and RAF Feltwell. Currently, RJH are supplying 9 separate contractors with aggregates and removing of demolition arisings across all 3 locations. The most notable works taking place be the expansion of fuel stations undertook by Adler and Allen, the reconstruction of sports facilities by A.D. Bly and Taurine Contracting, renewing of taxiway concrete and fulfilling an airfield maintenance package as part of KVF 35 by Volker Fitzpatrick, as well as minor works being completed in preparation for the next phase of major works. On the 29th of January 2024, BBC announced an additional £39 million was being allocated to RAF Lakenheath by the US Secretary of Defence to construct more staffing accommodation and emergency airfield repair facilities for the next 5 years, as well as to partake in the nuclear weapons storage capabilities.
Ryan, it's amazing how quickly 3 minutes goes. Can you finish up in one sentence, please?
Yep, one more. To further bolster this, by the news last night that $50 billion is to be allocated to help Ukraine fight Russia, with RAF Lakenheath and Mildenhall being essential for mid-stop refuelling and
I think I'll
distribution
have to
of
stop you there,
equipment.
Brian. Ryan, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much indeed. Thank you. Right, members, it's committee discussion and debate now. And remember, you have to put your hand up. Peter?
Just one quick question. What's your view on it being 3 years long? If you've mentioned some projects being going
Peter,
on for 5 years.
you can't ask him a direct question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay if you ask.
Yeah.
If you ask effectively
Okay.
the officer, yes.
Sorry.
Okay. So,
Of the view on it being only 3 years, how firm and definite are we on that, given what's been said about the other projects, some of which I think were mentioned as 5 years?
yes. Okay. I will direct that. Can you answer the question, Joanne?
Yes.
Do you want to do it, Rachel?
Well, what we're dealing with is an application for 3 years. When we get, if it was approved and we got close to 3 years, there is an option that it could be extended. But at the moment, what's on the table is an application for three years. I don't know why it was just submitted for 3 years, perhaps in terms of the applicant's certainty over contracts that they may have already. But beyond that, another application would need to be submitted to renew that temporary consent if it was approved.
Yeah, just to be clear, the reason I wanted you to direct the questions, because I thought officers might have the answer. If they hadn't, I could have then engaged directly with Ryan. Okay, just to be clear on that. Right, just to make sure, because I'm getting used to this old style again, I've got Councillor London, Councillor David Smith and Councillor Glossop so far. Anybody else want to speak? Councillor Waldron and Neil. Okay, Councillor London, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think a lot of the local animosity for this seems to come down to the issue of fairness with regards to Stone Curlews and Brandon. So in that light, I'd like to ask officers, if something along these lines were to occur, an application were to come in, say on the outskirts of Brandon that was still in the SPA, something like that, is there anything about this application that sets it apart differently from any other application in the SPA near Brandon? And in that counterfactual, if something like this were to, you know, an industrial unit application to come forward in Brandon, would that similarly? I'm trying to dig down into why this one is acceptable and yet other things aren't. And as far as I can tell, the current differentiation is industrial versus residential, and therefore the main question is: does that mean that other industrial uses near Brandon are similarly as acceptable to officers as this one?
Okay, thank you, Councillor London. Councillor David Smith, please.
Well, that was quick. I wasn't expecting to speak so soon. Yeah, can you clarify? You said the traffic increase is a modest 12%. Can you put some numbers on that? Because I mean, 12% of 8 is 1, but 12% of 800 is 100. So that, you know, it's all about numbers, really, isn't it? We were led to believe that this plant is was regarded as mobile. Can you tell me if there's any difference in the policies, whether it would be a permanent site rather than mobile? When does mobile become permanent? If it's going to be extended year on contract by contract, when does it become permanent? There was a mention about the 3 years. Peter mentioned that. Will the bund be built before this site comes into operation? And do they supply any other sites from this particular plant, or is it just Lakenheath? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Glossop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to know, the recycling plant had planning permission. Has that got a time limit on it, or is that forever? The other thing I do want to ask, and I know Councillor London has alluded to what I was going to say, I don't quite understand Natural England, because are we saying that, I know that housing is considered a problem because of cats and movements and cars and all of those kind of things. So within within Natural England's criteria, are we now saying that they look at employment sites quite differently to housing? I'm finding this all a little bit odd, so if we can have some clarification on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glossop. Councillor Waldron, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to draw attention to number 10, Natural England's No Objections, on page 15. If we read through it, they're based the plans on submitted for further information supplied. Natural England considers the proposal of development will not have likely effect on Breckland Special Protection Area. Fine. It also notes, Natural England notes that the Habitat Regulations Assessment has been not been produced by our authority, but by the applicant. As the competent authority, it is our responsibility to produce the HRA and be accountable for its conclusions. We obviously haven't been, because we're still using the Middlemarch assessment from 2023. Why is this, and why hasn't it been done if we're going to carry the can if it's wrong? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waldron. Councillor Neil, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very familiar with Lakenheath Base because I'm on there all the time, and I know the size of the lorries. And at this moment in time in this debate, I just want to talk about the logistical side of things. It's said that they deliver to Mildenhall, Lakenheath and Feltrell. It also says that they supply Suffolk and Norfolk sites. There was a meeting with Norfolk County Council, and because the sidings where the stuff comes in Brandon has been expanded to a second siding, so they're doubling the amount of aggregate that's coming in. That's got to be shipped over, I assume, to this plant and other locations as well. And the amount of mess that's created, I visited that site, the station, and the amount of mess that's created from aggregate is unbelievable. You've really got to see it to believe it. I'm sure you touched on it when you had your site visit. And they hadn't got a wheel wash there. So that's a condition that's now going to be created at the station. And for the traffic management, the amount of vehicles that's been going through Brandon High Street, it's been agreed that from Brandon to get to this location, they're going to go to Munford, which is into Norfolk, across to Thetford, down the A11, to Five Ways Roundabout, and up to this location. Now, there's no way that's going to happen. What is going to happen is the rat run. And these great lorries, they're going to be going through from the station at Brandon. They're going to go to Wheaton, to Hockwold, through Lakenheath, Ereswall, and the Ereswall turning comes out onto the 1066. So that's the route that let's make no mistake about it. That's the route that's going to be taken. And these lorries, they're going to take the shortest route to the plant, and that's pushing lorries through the villages. So the logistical side of it has grave concerns for me, and that's all I'll say at this moment in time.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Any other members wishing to contribute at this point? Councillor Bull, please.
Just a very quick one on the transport. My understanding is at the moment, once the aggregate has been dealt with, it goes off to other batching plants to make concrete. Presumably now that if they're able to make concrete there will be a huge cut down on all that
aggregate being taken off the site. So that must be a plus in a way, that they're going to do the batching on site rather than sending it all off. Just a thought.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Right, can I come back to officers, please, to respond to the questions that have been raised so far?
Hi. Sorry, I've been trying to look for the exact figures in terms of what the 12% increase would represent, and unfortunately I don't have those in front of me. I've not been able to find them at such short notice. But I mean, it is quite a modest increase in terms of what traffic would be accessing the site, and it would reduce the overall traffic in the area, because the lorries coming to the concrete batching plant would obviously then be using the materials largely already on the recycling plant, and then just travelling to Gate 8 rather than travelling further afield. As when does temporary become permanent? Well, we are only looking at the temporary permission, which does really allow the local authority to keep a level of control, because in 3 years' time they will have to come back and request an extension of time if that's what they require, rather than it just being there permanently. It is also being mentioned, or has been provided for me, that the plant itself is a movable structure, so it gets moved on and off site, and it gets moved to different places. So I don't think there's the intention of having the temporary structure there becoming permanent, but we do have that control after 3 years. Mentioned the bunding site, whether that's to become operational. That is not part of this application. I don't have details about the bunding. I believe it's being constructed to the north of the site in association with the shooting range, but it certainly does not form any part of this application. So I wouldn't have specifics on that. And also to note, I know there were questions about the level of aggregates coming to the recycling plant. The recycling plant has an established planning permission. It gained an LDC in 2014. We really can't take into account the aggregates going to the recycling centre itself. That already has permission. Whether the batching plant is approved, whether it's not, the recycling plant has permission, and that will continue as it is at the moment. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. There was 2 or 3 questions asked about the Stone Curlew and the different view in relation to the comments that we've had from Natural England, and then Councillor Waldron's asked about the Habitats Regulations Assessment as well. So in terms of Stone Curlew and the comments that we receive from Natural England and other nature conservation bodies, and in terms of the evidence about the impact of development on the Stone Curlew, it does relate specifically to residential development. So the concerns relate to recreational impacts from new houses being built close to the SPA, so that you've got more population that might go into areas to walk, or to recreate within the forest or the heathland, that impacts the presence of Stone Curlew, as well as predation from domestic pets. So the main concern that the nature conservation bodies have about development and how it impacts on that species does relate to residential development as opposed to commercial or industrial development. So to answer your question, Councillor London, if we had this sort of proposal in Brandon itself, subject to all other things being equal, it would be the type of proposal that could be acceptable in Brandon itself, because it doesn't involve those residential or recreational impacts on the species that we're concerned about. And I think that answers your question as well, Councillor Glossop, which was related to why is employment different to housing. In terms of the habitats regulations assessment, it is quite normal for a developer to do what is normally termed as a shadow HRA or an information HRA. So it's the applicant's version of what they think the impacts are in relation to that habitat or that species. From that, though, we then do our own habitats regulations assessment as the competent authority. So the comments from Natural England would have been at a time that we hadn't got to the stage of doing our own HRA. But if you look on the website and our ecology officer's comments, and I think they're summarised in the committee report, we have done our duty in terms of the habitats regulations, and we have done our own assessment under those regulations following the comments that we have received from Natural England. So hopefully that explains that point. We've certainly fulfilled that duty as a competent authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel and Joanne. Right, Councillor Dicker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, please let me off my extreme ignorance here, but I don't know what an LDC is that Joanne mentioned at all. I apologise for not knowing this. I'm very interesting about the stone curlew and I certainly learn something every time I come here to this committee regarding the explanation Rachel's just given. I know we can't take into consideration, which is a shame, because I am concerned of the traffic movements from the station in Thetford that obviously comes under Norfolk. And were they consulted at all, Norfolk County Council, because it still obviously will create traffic possibly in their area. I find this hard, that obviously permission was given for this site to operate there, yet we as councillors here don't know how many extra movements there actually be, so we can get an idea. Plus, we don't actually know how much effect this will have down the High Street of Brandon. If I may, I do look at the Facebook page of Brandon and see concerns on there which does worry me, and it's a shame that it seems I can't take that into consideration at all. I think possibly, I don't know if there are any limits on the permission that the site has for movements to the site from the local area, let's say from the station. So it's a funny one, this, that I understand what we can only object on, if we wanted to object to, and yet we would then be making potentially the High Street in Brandon suffer more. So, difficult one, this, but thank you anyway.
I suggest you won't be alone on that.
Do you want me to answer the LDC question?
Oh, the LDC, yes, lawful development certificate.
Yeah, so sorry, Chair, it's lawful development certificate. So it's like a certificate of lawfulness. Because it relates to minerals, it was a certificate granted by the County Council in 2014. So sorry, we went into planning language. It's all right, it's not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dicker. Now, as I looked up, I saw Councillor Thorndike, Smith and London. I'm not sure that was the right order, but I'll go with Councillor Thorndike first, please.
Thank you, Chair. 12% increase, I think, roughly equates to where you've got 8 now, you'll have 9, which will follow on. Whether you think that's an insignificant increase or not is your problem. We haven't got very much on noise on this thing, and I'm a bit concerned. I noticed on the top of page 26, it says you won't hear it because the rest of the aggregate recycling facility will be running. So the question is the aggregate recycling facility running all the time, so this will fade into the background behind it. But I'm a bit worried because we had plans for one on my patch some years ago, and one of the things it got thrown out on was noise. So I'm a bit concerned about we're not seeing a true noise figure for this plant when it's running at full chat. We got comments somewhere that it's very quiet because of its electric motor, but it's not quoted as running at high speed. It probably is somewhere and I haven't found it, but I'm a bit concerned about noise levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorndike. Councillor David Smith, please.
Yes, just come back on my previous question. I'm not sure whether they got fully answered. I did ask if there's any difference in our policies, whether the site is considered mobile or permanent, and also is this just to supply Lakenheath or is it supplying sites further afield? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David Smith. Councillor John London, please.
Thank you, Councillor Chairman Andrew Smith.
No, I
know. 2 questions and 3 suggestions. I'm not quite at making a proposal stage yet. So sort of not question, but a suggestion with regards to this and the stone curlews. We've just had our previous training session for this body. I really feel like if officers were able to provide a training session on the entirety of the stone curlew issue, that would be very, very useful with this in mind. Secondly, in 3 years, say this is approved and it comes back up again for approval in 3 years' time, will our decision now have any material consideration on the extension of the application, or will the application in 3 years, if it were to come forward, be an entirely separate thing that would not depend upon what we say here? I then have 3 things that I think we would want to have in place if we were to approve this, which would be 3 additional conditions. I don't believe they are particularly onerous, but I note that there is no condition conditioning the use of the wheel washing facility. Seeing as it is already company policy, I don't think that would be a particularly onerous condition to say that the wheel washing facility should be used. Secondly, as we've heard, this is in effect due to an accident of democratic boundaries, one half of 2 submissions, including issues and things that are happening in Norfolk. And I think that if we were to put this one forward and accept this application, we should probably mirror the traffic management plan that was put forward to avoid to make sure that vehicles are avoiding Brandon High Street, and possibly we could look up and mirror the wording that was used to ensure that there are no issues where, say for example, Norfolk is trying to impact how journeys are being made in Suffolk, and we are not trying to impact how journeys are being made in Norfolk, and that it is entirely equivalent across that boundary and that everyone is working in concert. And finally, I note that when talking about the use of this plant and the use of the recycled materials on site, words were used along the lines of we will be able to use the recycled materials and we should be using the recycled materials, but there was nothing actually conditioning that a certain proportion of the material being created in the batching plant will actually come from the recycled materials on site. And to my mind, the location of this batching plant co-located with the recycling plant, the only reason to put it here is for that synergy of being able to use that recycled material. And yet, there is nothing in this application that says that recycled material would actually be used in the batching plant. It could all just be brought in from outside. I don't think that might be economical, but again, I think that looking at some kind of condition where we're making sure that it's not a case of, and there turns out to be no further aggregate in the area that needs to be recycled, so we're just going to all bring it in through Brandon. Some kind of condition about that, if officers could word that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor London. I've got no other members wishing to speak. Oh, yes, Councillor Hood.
Yes, just one point of clarification. I wrote down when the applicant was speaking that what was going to be there would be 7 metres higher than now. Can I just be clarified? That is, and then I've got something I wanted to say.
Okay. Rachel can clarify that.
Yes, Chair, I think that was relating to what Joanne has clarified is a bond that is off-site. So we've got the shooting range just to the north of the site, and there was a consent some time ago that included quite significant bonding around that development. So that reference is to the bonding that's off-site and nothing to do with this planning application.
But visible from the road. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So it's no secret that I believe that we should take local councillors' comments extremely seriously, and I'm not persuaded by the reference in section 60 that comments from local members concerning responses are noted. Each application must be considered on its own merits, because my reading of local members' comments is that they are considering this application on its own merits. I also note that the Place Service Landscape Officer has objected. As far as the noise, again, I'm not persuaded that that's not an issue, nor the traffic. And going to section 46. There's a statement that as such the development would be visible within the wider rural landscape, but it would read as being part of the established recycling centre. So what? It would be visible. And then 50, taking the above into account, it's considered that taken on balance, the proposal would be acceptable. I feel very uncomfortable about this application, particularly in light of the local members' objections.
Thank you, Councillor Hood. Councillor Marmay-White, just beat you to it, Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, yes, the local members have written in, but it's interesting that the parish council hasn't commented, I think. Also, I too am interested in where this aggregate is really going. Are we certain it's only going to be going to the RAF and Mildenhall? Because I find it surprising there's no letter of support from any of those organisations. I would have expected them to have commented and made the point that this is useful, having this batching plant on their doorstep because of all the reasons we've heard. So that does surprise me. So if we could have a little bit more clarification about, or certainty that these aggregates really are being used, or the cement rather, is really being used locally and not travelling miles, that would be useful. Thank you, Chairman.
Just before I come to you, Councillor Neil, can I just clarify, look, the impact that's been considered is on Brandon, but the actual ward members are Councillor Gerald Kelly and Councillor Tracy Whitehand, because it's within the Lake and Heath ward, just for absolute clarity. But the impact, quite clearly, is felt more closely by the ward members for Brandon. So, Councillor Neil, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I disagree with what you've just said there, surprisingly, because yes, it's going to have an impact on Brandon, and Brandon station's having the second siding, so there's twice the amount of aggregate coming in. Logically, twice the amount of aggregate's going to have to come out. And because of the condition that's been suggested that they take a different route to the batching plant by going to Munford, to Thetford and down the A11, the alternative is that they come through those villages. And anyone who lives in a village, the last thing they want is a stream of these lorries, and they are massive lorries, coming through their village. I know particularly, I mentioned Ereswall, there's a real tight bend there, and the flint walls continuously having to be rebuilt where two vehicles can't pass, a car and a bus or a lorry. If the car doesn't hold back, the HGV, it clips the flint wall. And that's what we're doing. We're going to be pushing the traffic, these lorries, through the villages. And I don't think that's acceptable. If anything, I would want to push for a deferment on this until we can get the numbers correct. How many what is 12%, you know? We need, as a percentage, it doesn't represent a number. And I think we need to know the growth that this is going to install. And one other point, directly across the road from the entrance to this site is a school. And what impact is this facility going to have on that school? And I think when we're talking about is it a mobile facility or is it a permanent facility, I think that relates to the fact that it's sectionally built, so it could be dismantled and taken somewhere else. But once it's built, isn't it? That's the reality of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I wasn't trying to be controversial, by the way. I was just trying to reassure members that it's in a different ward to Brandon Town Centre. That's all I was attempting to do. You were, yes. But thank you very much, as usual. Now, look, I'm going to take that as a proposal then, Councillor Neal. Is that seconded, please? Councillor Hood. Now, as ever, we need reasons for the deferment. Is it about clarity on, I mean, Councillor Thorndyke mentioned noise. Others have mentioned other matters. I'm not trying to steer you, but... Vehicles, yeah. Oh, yeah, use your microphone, please, because we're live streaming.
Sorry. Yes, the noise and the increase in vehicle movement, clarity on the number of that anticipated.
Okay. Is there anything you want to add to that, Councillor Hood?
Well, it would be helpful to have a response from the parish council. I didn't know if they haven't given one. Sorry. It would be helpful to have a response from the parish council. I did note that as well they hadn't given one, but it would seem quite important.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm not sure we can twist their arm on that. Can I just, I've got two members. I've got Councillor Ball and Councillor Glossop. Councillor Ball was just before you, Councillor Glossop.
Thank you, Chair. The plant, if we don't approve the batching equipment, the plant is still going to exist. And it strikes me in this day and age, there is more and more requirement for recycling this aggregate. So although I understand entirely about lorries coming through Brandon, they are still going to be going through Brandon to the recycling plant because that will still be operational. And I know we talk about the 12% and how many it is, but there must be a reduction in lorries travelling great distances leaving the plant if the cement is going, they're using the on-site stuff, and then the cement is going just to Lakenheath and the local places. So, you know, I do understand the worry, but those lorries are still going to be going into that plant because it's an operational recycling plant. And I can only see the business there getting busier, you know. Thank you.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, obviously Joanne's here and Rachel's here, and they'll take these comments on board if this does get deferred when I put it to the vote. Councillor Glossop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we do need to know whether this plant is just for cement for Lakenheath, because that, in a way, was the way it was being sold to us, or is it for everywhere? So if we are going to defer it, that's another reason why we're deferring, because we don't actually know if it is only just for the RAF base, please.
Thank you, Councillor Glossop. Councillor London, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't normally ask to question applicants. However, if we are looking at deferring and the answers to the questions are in this room, that might be an appropriate time to just ask if the 12% number could be clarified.
apparently we have an answer, which I'm going to come back to officers now. There's been some research going on. Councillor London. So when you're ready, officers.
Just in regards to the traffic point, through the planning statement, it gives various facts and figures, but it does say that approximately this will create 5 additional vehicle movements per day to the site.
Chair, I'd picked up a couple of other questions. Obviously, noting that we've got the motion for deferral. Councillor Smith asked about, do we view mobile and permanent any differently in terms of policy considerations? No, we don't. It's a structure in the landscape and an activity associated with it. Whether it was mobile or permanent plant, that really doesn't make a difference to our policy considerations. A couple of members have picked up on this point about, you know, will it only be for aggregates that are on the site already? And then also, where does the product go? Is it just to the base, or are there other destinations? And I think if members are moving towards a vote for deferral, I think that would be a useful addition to clarify. We have been told it is for the base, but we need to be able to clarify that, and it would be helpful for us to be able to say whether it's suitable to restrict it to such if that was the case, which goes to one of the points that you've raised, Councillor London. I think that was it. So I'd captured, in terms of a deferral, I'd captured queries in relation to noise. We can certainly get some more information about the number of vehicles, but we've told you what is in the planning statement. Questions about routing, and then also the destination and origin of the products that would go through the plant is what I've noted down as a question. Oh, and also the question of the parish council. We can try and consult them again to find out if there is, if they do have any comments, but it appears that they don't at this stage.
Thanks, Rachel. I've got Councillor Thorndyke, then Councillor Hood. Councillor Thorndyke, please.
Yeah, on the thoughts of where it's going to go, I thought the applicant said that he would be using Lakenheath, Mildenhall and Feltwell as sites for delivery, so we already have information that relates to that. It will not be just going up to Lakenheath, it'll be going all over.
Thank you, Councillor Thorndyke, and dare I say, Councillor, I meant, yeah, Councillor Hood.
You've dared. Yeah. Is it possible? I mean, I'm concerned about the cement dust too in the recommendation, and without wishing to be controversial, enforcement has always been something I think we have struggled with, and I would be concerned that if we are going to need to enforce matters, if this is approved, there should be much greater clarification of how we're doing that, because, you know, it's no secret enforcement just, well, my area doesn't seem to happen. So I don't think we can leave it without specific, you know, how is it going to be enforced? For instance, if there was a problem with dust, which I would be concerned about, how do we find out and how do we make sure it's dealt with? So I would have liked to see greater specificity in any kind of enforcement requirements, but also, again, I'm not persuaded by the applicant's response to the dust situation. So if there is, if we could have clarification, if we do defer, that'd be helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Hood. Here was I hoping you would be the last member, but Councillor Bull, that just caught my eye.
I'll keep it very quick then. I was just going to say, the concern that the cement might go to 3 different places, if it's not being converted to cement, the aggregate on the site, it's going to be going out of the place anyway. So those lorries are going to be going even further afield. So I'm not sure on balance if there is a, trying to say it can only go to those 3 places is going to reduce anything.
But let's hope the work that will be presented to us for the next Development Control Committee meeting, I'm expecting, would have full clarification of that, Councillor Ball. Councillor David Smith, please.
Just a quick one, really. I might have missed it in the application, but is this a 7-day-a-week operation? Because going back to the numbers, fives doesn't sound a lot, but if 7 days a week, 365 days a year, amounts to almost 2,000 movements. So I know it's always a trick to sort of use as smaller figure as possible. Okay, thank you.
You've used the multiplier of 5 there, have you? Yeah, okay. Right, I've got no members wishing to speak. Have officers got anything else to add?
The opening hours are specified in the planning statement. They are apparently going to be the same as the operational hours that the larger recycling plant has. So that would be 7 till 5 Monday to Friday and 7 till 12 on Saturday. So nothing on a Sunday.
Thank you, Joanne. Right, no members. Right, here we go. It's been proposed for the reasons that I'm not going to summarise, but Rachel has very kindly done. So by Councillor Neal for deferment, and it's been seconded by Councillor Hood. Could I see a show of hands in favour of deferment, please? Okay. And those against, please. And it's over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. That's 7 votes in favour and 6 votes against. So the motion is carried and the application is deferred.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Claire. Thank you very much indeed, members. There's no meeting in May, so this, all things being equal, could return for the first meeting in June, at which point I will close the meeting and wish you a good break from development control. All right? Refresh your batteries, Councillor Neal. Take care.